Welcome to the No Name Podcast. This is episode 37. We'll be jumping into John chapter 4 here in a moment. Feels like it's been a while since we've done this. I think we only skipped a week. But hopefully you guys were able to catch up. Hopefully you guys have gone through John chapter 1 through 3. We left off our last episode talking about Nicodemus, which I really think that was a good topic. And as we go through this study, we're not going to go through every single scripture. We're going to try to capture key points in the chapter. So recommend you guys kind of we will get lost in some of the scriptures because they are very good. But do recommend you guys read the whole chapter. Again, I always forget, hit the like and subscribe button and push this out to other people. Closing out chapter 3 at the end of it, just high level, John the Baptist, some of his disciples come and they're saying, you know, hey, Jesus is over there and he's baptizing people and he's doing this and more people are going to him. And this was a new concept, I guess, for them, because typically if you were someone who was creating a following, you didn't want to share your followers. And so here John makes it very clear. He's like, I'm not the Messiah.
Right, I'm not
I
the one.
didn't say that I was the Messiah. I said I was a forerunner. I'm the one that comes before.
Right.
And I do like that he says I must decrease so he can increase.
That's right.
And I just think that's I think in all of us, that's almost one of the things. Like, I think a lot of times as we look at the Bible, our relationship with God, there's facets, different views of, or different perspective of the relationship with God. There's the relationship one-on-one with God and that growth and growing in that. But then there's the perception that people have of us, right? How they look at us. And I think we should take on that concept of John because we're supposed to be forerunners for Christ. Yeah. Like, we're supposed to be the John the Baptist to Christ, in that our lives and things should be calling people to draw to Christ. And so there's a part of us that should also, that we must decrease so he can increase in our lives. In other words, parts of us will decrease, our pride, our self, worrying about those things so that he can increase, right? They see him more in us versus them seeing us. And I think, I also found it interesting. John just kind of echoes something Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, which was interesting because Jesus is not here in the conversation. This is recorded by John, and which is different from John the Baptist. And he says a similar thing. You know, you got to believe in the Son to have everlasting life. Like, to know God, you got to believe in him. And this is the exact same thing Jesus is telling Nicodemus. And so there must have been a point where John the Baptist and Jesus sat down, and John understood this, but Jesus was opening up more to him on his purpose here. And so I definitely find that's interesting that they're both echoing the same message.
Yeah. You're still talking about him and Nicodemus, right?
Well, with the messaging that he was echoing there about, you know, the famous scripture, John 3:16, you know, everlasting life and believing in him. John's echoing the same sentiments at the end of chapter 3.
I think it's kind of interesting, though, that he when he's talking to Nicodemus, and, you know, it seemed not really, I don't know if you call it sarcasm, but, you know, he's saying, like, you know, you're supposed to be a teacher and you don't know these things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, and then you look at, like, you know, Nicodemus was a rabbi. Like, you know, so it's like those people had, like, you know, they had, like, privilege. They were, like, you know, like, high pristine people. You know? And he took time to go and just talk to him. That's why I'm excited to go to the next chapter, because, like, if you look at that, like, how, like, he went from him to that lady.
Yeah.
So that showed me that it's like Jesus didn't care about who you were, you know, what ethnicity you came from, you know, what background you had. He came to save everybody.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So we'll jump to chapter 4 now. So if you jump into chapter 4, no, I think that's a good point. Yeah. So you jump into chapter 4, and this is the famous story of the Samaritan woman. You know, Jesus and his disciples come. The disciples go off to go find food. And Jesus at a well. It's the middle of the day, and this lady's coming and drawing water. I find it interesting if you read it as it opens up. Jesus leaves because the Pharisees are seeing that he's baptizing more people. He's built like there's a following.
Yeah, he's starting to get people following him now.
The clarity and I've kind of read this and heard this in several different places. Like before this, Jesus has at this point has not claimed to be the Messiah.
Right.
He has not made any
openly.
He has not openly made the proclamation of it.
Right.
But so the Pharisees are not after him for being for claiming to be the Messiah. They're after him at this point right now because he's creating a big following. It's very his teachings are very different.
Disruptive. Yep.
Yeah, disruptive to the religious order at that time. So so I guess we'll start there with the Samaritan woman. I mean, Jesus is coming midday. I think there's so many different aspects in regards to the Samaritan woman that we should peel this onion a bit. So I guess who wants to start off first on the Samaritan woman?
Okay. No, because I was reading the first couple of scriptures because technically Jesus wasn't baptizing people. It was his disciples.
Right. He wasn't doing it.
But he was getting the credit that he was baptizing the people.
Oh, okay.
And that's what the Pharisees were hearing, And, like even going back to Nicodemus, when Jesus spoke, you see, the thing that the Pharisees and all them knew was everything about the Old Testament, everything that was taught by Moses, by, Abraham and all them. So now Jesus was coming with something fresh, something new, the good news, what they called it, So it was freaking them out because even though Jesus was following everything from the beginning of to while he's there, the laws and all that, they were still looking at him like he was teaching something different, And then and then it comes here where the Pharisees find out that he's baptizing, And in verse 2 it says, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples, and that's when he departed, And going back to that scripture you guys said about we must decrease, right, for him to increase.
Right.
Yeah. We live in a time that people love to lift up the pastor, lift up the evangelist, lift up the gospel groups, and all that, and it's so easy for it to go to our heads because technically human nature is to be praised. We all love praise. Nobody likes criticism. We all love praise.
Yep.
And it's hard to get grounded and to especially us to remember that it's not us, it's Jesus doing the work through us. So I believe that like Jesus right here, he hadn't really started, his ministry hadn't really exploded. But I believe that God will put people in our path that God wants us to minister. And just like Jesus, wherever he was at, he found somebody to minister. He wasn't only concerned about the multitudes or ministering on Sunday.
He did one-on-one with people.
Wherever he saw, he would start ministering. And I think that's what we lost in our Christianity, a lot of us, because you can bump into somebody at a store or at your job, and all of a sudden they start talking to you, and then all of a sudden they start telling you about their problems and this and that, and sometimes God will tell you, hey, I brought this one to minister, you minister, but sometimes we don't, because we're so busy in our life thinking of all our problems, our circumstances. And that's one thing Jesus taught us.
Well, and I think to that point, I mean, there's a couple things in what you were saying, but I think into that point is, I think sometimes what we define as ministry.
Right.
Because if you look at Jesus in the Samaritan woman, he didn't really preach to her. Like, he didn't tell her, like he told Nicodemus, you got to be born again or anything like that. Like, literally, all he did was he was trying to have a conversation with her, and then he begins to, like, I find it, I don't know, maybe funny's the wrong word, but find it humorous. Like, her whole testimony is, he told me everything I knew.
But
He told me everything I've done.
Yeah.
Like that was her whole testimony.
That was it.
It wasn't
nothing more.
It wasn't, and he forgave me. But her whole testimony to running, it says like when she went running out to everyone was, there's a man, the man's out there, he's the Messiah, and he's told me everything I've ever done.
Okay, so hold on. So this lady goes back, right? Now, this is want to ask. So Jesus, he sent, like I said, he do a lot of one-on-one with people, obviously. So he sent his disciples away because he knew he was going to encounter this lady who was there, right? And so with this lady, I think Jesus was showing a lot of like compassion to her. He was being patient with her. He was showing her that, you know, she can have redemption in her life, because this is a lady who was coming to get water in the middle. What was it? In the middle of the day? It was a time period wherever she was coming to get water, she wasn't coming with the other ladies.
Yeah.
So obviously she was being discriminated against.
Yeah, because they all knew her background,
right?
Yeah.
So they,
you know what I'm saying?
They
so,
want to associate with her,
right? Well, and I think that's a very valid point. That's a good point in that when you look at it, and something that you said a second ago, I think Jesus. So look, Jesus was God in the flesh, so he still had some divinity. He had divinity power, and so he knew this woman was coming.
Of course,
he knew this was the time. He went there specifically to talk with her. Like this was like
right. It wasn't coincidence.
Yeah,
right.
He went there. It wasn't I happened to see her, so I'm gonna have a conversation. He knew she was coming, and I think to your point, sometimes that's where we have to peel back the onion of the story. Like it's not just that he told her everything. First, that he even spoke to her. Like she's surprised that he's speaking to her.
Right, because they was like, you're not even supposed to even be speaking to a Samaritan woman at that. Yeah. You know, so
and that's what I mean. You know, when I mean ministering, that's where the hard part is. You have to separate ministry and ministering. See, ministry is something we do as an organization, as a group, or you're a pastor, you're part of a ministry in the church. Ministering, I believe God calls everybody to ministry.
Oh yeah.
You know, He gives us the calling.
I think
and that's what I mean. The congregation of Christians, technically, because most of the time you hear Christians,
but I think
I'm gonna let you talk to the pastor.
But I think that's the problem there, because we call it ministering.
Right.
The moment you say ministering, people in the U.S. think, okay, minister, pastor,
right?
But if you look at the New Testament, they didn't really use the word ministering. They talked about this is really what ministry comes down to. It's spreading the good news, being the testimony, and that's what we're all called to do. We're all called to spread the good news, to share our testimonies. It wasn't just the apostles that did it. It wasn't just the leaders of the church. It was everyone. That was everyone's calling. And I think that's why I think people get very technical when they don't want to do it. And so when they hear, okay, like when you tell someone go minister to somebody, to them they're thinking, okay, I got to pull out my Bible. I got to find the 5 scriptures I need to say. I need to say the most holiest preaching. And they forget that in spreading the good news, like here, Jesus just talked to her. Yeah. Like he was just talking with her.
That's it.
And I think that's sometimes what people miss in all of this. It's supposed to be building that relationship and having that conversation.
Since the day I got saved, I really never went and try to shove Jesus into people's life. You know, I would try to get to know them, and especially if they were my friends, I already knew them. So when I would go, I would give them a flyer, and I wasn't there condemning them to hell. You gotta get saved, and then I was just going to see how they were doing and all that. And most of them, they saw the change in my life, so they would start asking questions.
Yeah.
So I started just talking to them, and even to people, whoever I knew, I would talk to them. I wouldn't try to shove Jesus, and through time they'll see something in you, and they'll start asking questions, and then you gotta allow that's where God allows you to minister to them, but a lot of people want to come out condemning them, and you gotta go to church, you're gonna go to hell,
I don't really think that's what that when Jesus was talking to this lady, like I said, he was talking to this lady with compassion. He was trying to.
Well, really,
he was trying to show her.
He just asked for water.
Right. I'm just saying
that she freaked out.
Right. Well, I think I think that was
I
think that was compassion.
Yeah.
Right? Just in asking for water.
Yeah.
I think that's why I say.
Yeah, but
sometimes in the story,
the lady didn't even know who he was.
Well, she didn't know.
But here's why I say it's with compassion, and this is why I always say when you read this, you have to read it with an Eastern mindset, not a Western mindset. You have to peel the onion back. The reason I say it's with compassion is because she might have not known who he was, but she knew he was a Jew.
Right.
And for him to even ask something of her was something of compassion, because a Jew would have never spoken to a Samaritan
woman. Right.
And so when you peel that onion back, you have to understand the reason.
That was my understanding.
The reason for that is because the culture there, right?
Right.
The Samaritans were... And this is why we do these studies to help with some of this. And I encourage you guys to go and do the research yourself and read on it more. But if you look at the Old Testament, you got to remember that Israel was only a full country under two kings. That was David and Solomon. They weren't even a full country under Saul. They were still divided even under Saul. When David came in, David was able to unite the kingdoms, and they had one kingdom. Then under Solomon, they were still one kingdom. Once Solomon was gone and his next kid, the kingdom became divided, and you had a kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south, the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of Israel. When you had those two things, and there's plenty of history there. That's where you get 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Encourage you to go read it. There's good YouTube videos that'll give you history on it, but I'm just giving a high level on this. They both were conquered by different kingdoms.
Yeah.
And the kingdom of the north, I think, was conquered by the Assyrians or something like that. And their custom was, in order for there not to be an uprising, they took people from different areas and exiled them so that they would be mixed. That's why you hear the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Is they took those people, they sent them away, they kept some there, and they brought other people in. So for the Jews, they saw themselves as pure blood. The Samaritans, they couldn't tell where they were because they were so mixed up. And so they were considered second-class citizens. And so when you start peeling this onion away, you start seeing, like, first of all, Jesus even talking to her and requesting, like, that shocked her, right? Because even to your earlier point, from what we can allude from the story, even her own people rejected her.
Yeah.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Even the
Definitely.
Samaritan. So she's double rejected, right? Because if it's any other Jew, they reject her. And then her own people reject her. That's why she's coming in the midday, because they know her history. They know the rumors of her history.
And I think that's why Jesus sent the disciples away to go and buy food.
Oh, yeah, because they would have been talking, hey, you don't talk to her.
Coming, she would have probably even wouldn't get to talk to Jesus.
Yeah.
So... yeah, I mean, you're right about the compassion, but what I'm saying, she didn't even know Jesus.
Yeah.
Before he even spoke to her and got near the water, So number one, I mean, she was probably surprised that Jesus didn't move away.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean.
That's
what I mean. And that's where the compassion was that.
And then that he asked for water. Didn't minister to her at all. He asked for water.
Well,
and that's where she...
And I think that's where some of the... To your point, that's where some of the smaller things that we do sometimes. Yeah. Like sometimes we think that in trying to spread God's word, that we have to be behind a pulpit and stuff. But look at, like you were saying, like what Jesus merely did. All he did was there with her. He just in talking with her, he broke down the stigma of the Jews and the Samaritans.
Yeah. And then when he told her about the whole the water thing, I think she didn't really understand about how.
That's what I mean. We can minister a lot of ways. Jesus showed us there was a lot of ways. He started his ministry small. I mean, he was just talking to people. And like I've always said about these podcasts, if you can't talk to people, God is giving you a tool just to give them here.
I can agree with that.
Listen to this. Now, once you give it to the person, that's up to the person if he's going to listen to it or not. You did your job.
Well, I think,
God has given us, he shows us throughout time that he gives us tools to minister to the people.
Well, I think part of it is also, and that's why I think I'd rather step away the word ministry, because again, I think the connotation is you have to be a minister to
Right.
do it. So that's
Right.
why people, when you tell people,
it should be just sharing or
a witness,
yeah.
it's witnessing,
Witnessing,
but, it's because technically, anytime you speak the word, if you don't like the word ministering, but you speak the word, you're starting to minister. We don't need a degree, and that's where we get it wrong. Okay, the only time, well, especially here in America, we think that the only time we can minister is behind a pulpit.
Well,
because that's what we cultured.
Well, I think if you go into because if you look at the word because again, I think even looking at the word ministering, like that's, again, I think we're splitting hairs when we get to that point, but I think that's sometimes where people get lost in that because they use that excuse. And I don't think the Bible ever set it up. Like there was times where the apostles were supposed to be teaching. And, it talks about in Acts, like they took time away so that they could learn, so that they could teach the people. And they were getting into more doctrine and stuff like that and certain things. But that didn't stop the people from fellowshipping and being there and sharing with each other. And I think that's kind of the culture that's sometimes we built here in America, and that, and I can't say all of America, but like in certain, like when I think witnessing, right, and I'm just being honest here, like when
Jehovah's Witness.
No. When I think witnessing, I'm thinking from where I grew up and stuff. Like you have to set a time and date. You're going. You're knocking on doors. You're standing at the corner.
No, man.
But I'm giving you a perspective of
I got you.
What people sometimes think because they've been around organizations and things like that, and we had to make it so structured because people just don't go do it on their own. And what you're trying to now do is revert back to it being natural.
That's why,
that's what Jesus naturally witnessed to people. He didn't have to say, all right, today I'm going to go witness to 30 people, so I'm going to go knock on 30 houses. He just naturally started talking to people.
If you study history, like a lot of the great evangelists and ministers in the, way back, like John Wesley and, like even Billy Graham and all these men, these men didn't really, like try to publicize themselves. It started with word of mouth, of people hearing them, how they were teaching and or preaching, and God started using them. And that's why I believe, like, the moment any church thinks that, we have to do all this in structure, if we don't do it, what God tells us to do, He'll go and pick up people and start using them. See, because it says, go ye and make disciples.
See, you just said something that's important, though. You said, let God use, right? So, and I think that if you look at this story with this woman who was there, right?
Yeah.
And she, all she did was say, hey, this guy told me everything, everything I've done in my life, right? I think that regardless of her ethnicity, who she was, that Jesus still used her. Because wasn't this his first time that he publicly said, because if you, I think back, because I've been watching The Chosen, like I love that shit. So he did miracles and stuff. And he would tell people, don't tell nobody, right? Don't say nothing about it. But this lady, he told her, right? Did he tell her to go back and tell people?
Yeah.
So that shows me that God can use anybody, and I think Jesus, he chose her,
and even a method, it was a glass of water. It wasn't a flyer. It wasn't a Bible. It wasn't, a sermon he preached. All he did was ask for a glass of water, and for him to be speaking to her, right then and there was something,
Well, I think that,
and then that's where the conversation started.
Exactly. That opened the door for him because she, look, and no matter what, whether people know you're a Christian or not or whatever, and engaging in a conversation, we all come up with barriers. If someone came up off the street and started talking to me, my first thing is, what are you wanting?
Yeah, what's up?
What do you want? What are you trying to take? What are you trying to, that's. And Jesus knocked down that first one by just purely asking her for water, and then went into this thing. I think what was interesting here, Jesus didn't preach to her in the normal sense, but I think he asked her a quote. He made a statement in a way that I think is actually for all of us, is if you knew who I was, you know, and that was one of the things, right? Because she had a perceived notion when she saw him that he's just any other Jew, and why would he be talking to a Samaritan woman?
Yeah.
So she must have been thinking a couple of things. One, either this guy's here to ridicule her, or two, he must be really screwed up with the Jews if he's willing to talk to a Samaritan woman, you know, and
something going on, right?
And then her perception, she's looking at that, and he's more saying, if you knew who I was, right? Because a lot of times that's the thing. Like, I think even drawing in that, this was a relationship Jesus was trying to build with her. Like, you see me, but you don't know me. And I think that's the same thing for us, is like, do we truly know who he is? Right? Because he was like, if you knew who I was, you would be asking me for water. You would be asking me because I can provide you living water, right? And I think Jesus did that. It was recorded in here as well for our teaching and edification, because we do the same thing. Like, Jesus may come to us in our time of need, right? I have no idea what this lady might have been going through. Like, here she is coming midday, the hottest point of the day. She has all the things in her life. She's been through 5 different marriages. She's at the point where she's now living with someone that's not her husband. And all the baggage that comes with, I have no idea. But I think Jesus is telling her, you don't know me, but I know you.
And to your point, I think that she might have had some kind of belief. I think she had to have some kind of belief, because if you scroll down and you start reading at 20:25, it says, the woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ.
Yeah.
So obviously she had, you know what I mean?
They still practice Jewish customs. So even though they were considered mixed,
right,
they still practice a lot of the Jewish customs. So they knew of the Messiah. And to your point, so she had some understanding of it, because then she goes into a whole thing about where they should worship, which is another onion. You got to peel that onion back a little bit. But so she had an understanding of it, which is interesting in that aspect, because that led her to kind of push back and say, yeah, I know there's a Messiah coming. And this is when he makes a proclamation.
He's like, I'm him.
And he had not made that proclamation. Now, I don't know the full history and stuff, but I honestly believe he willingly made the proclamation here because she was going to go to Samaria and spread the word.
Yeah.
But there is no, at least my understanding, there probably wouldn't have been Jewish synagogues or anything there, because they try to avoid Samaria. So this was I believe, calculated to allow the word to be spread, but not to the point where Jesus would be. Because the moment Jesus starts making claims of the Messiah in a Jewish area, that's going to take him to the crucifixion.
Yeah.
That takes him directly into.
That's like blasphemy.
But here in Samaria, they would not have crucified him, because even though they didn't have the Jewish synagogues, they didn't have the Pharisees there.
And Jesus knew that.
And so I believe he calculated and made that, here I am, I'm going to come to these people and make that proclamation and start. And this is the first time he outwardly makes a proclamation that he's the Messiah.
Well, because if you go back, the woman was a smart woman. She wasn't dumb. Because when Jesus told her he would give her waters, living waters, the first thing she noticed, she told Jesus, you don't even have a bucket and rope. How you gonna get water?
Yeah, right.
You see?
Yeah.
And he was the same as Nicodemus. They were seeing everything as natural, with their natural eye instead of seeing what God was trying to tell them. And I believe that happens a lot in churches. We come to church, we hear the gospel music in the radio, on the internet, or we hear preachers and all that, but yet we never understand what Jesus is trying to tell us, because we start looking with our natural eye.
Yeah, I can believe it.
And in order for a miracle to happen, in order for something miraculous, there has to be faith, and sometimes has to be blind faith. And most of us, we see with our natural eyes. We gotta see something there, in order to believe. You know.
Well,
and this woman told man,
You
you don't have a bucket of water.
Yeah.
And the well is deep. How you gonna
get the water? Yeah.
You know. In other words, I'm giving you water, and you're telling me you're gonna give me some special kind of water.
And then she went on to even tell him like, "This is our ancestors' well. Like, how you gonna get better water than this?"
and I think part of it, to your point, in that when we look at it from the natural versus, and I really think this is why he goes down this path, right? He asks her, he tells her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I give them will never thirst. And her response is, "Sir, give me this water." I think part of it is, she physically went out to the well because she was physically thirsty. Like, she needed water for the day, right? And when they went to the well, they were getting water for that day, for all the usage of what they were needing. That's why most went in the early morning, because they had it for the full day. They didn't have to be out in the hot sun. She's trying to avoid people because of most likely the ridicule that she's getting. So she heads out there at midday. She goes gets water, but she does it because she knows she's thirsty, right? If she could avoid, like my perspective, if she could avoid, I think as Jesus is asking these questions, he's having to make her realize that you have to be spiritually thirsty. Like, because she answers the question from to your point, a physical standpoint, right? Where's this water? Let me have it, right? Because I don't ever have to go out there. And I think he's trying to get her to come, just like Nicodemus, to a spiritual part of it and have the understanding that, but there has to be an understanding that you're spiritually thirsty, right? She knew she was physically thirsty, but she probably wasn't aware that she was spiritually thirsty.
Right.
And so he goes with that, because then his next thing is, well, go call your husband. And she says, I have no husband. And Jesus says, you've said
right.
Because you actually have had 5 husbands, and one of whom you now have is not your husband. And he had to start opening her up to make her understand, the Bible doesn't give the reason why she was jumping from husband to husband. But I believe Jesus had to open her up to have her see that she was spiritually thirsty, and whatever it was, she was trying to find this fulfillment in whatever these.
She's not going to find it in husbands.
But he had to get her to the point where she was open to receive it. I think another perception that sometimes when we look at this, it's easy to be, because a lot of people will go to this story, and again, we use a Western concept. It says, oh, well, this woman was jumping from husband to husband and this and that. Well, we forget, when you start looking at the Eastern culture, she could not actually grant a divorce.
Right.
So if she had 5 husbands, they either died or they granted the divorce. Yeah. Now, she could ask for it, but she could not actually go and physically get a divorce from the ruling powers of that time.
Yeah.
So she's been passed around 5 times in this, whether she asked for it or they rejected her and divorced her. And so whatever it is has brought her to this point. And I think that's sometimes the perception we forget, because we look at her and say, okay, this was a woman who was promiscuous, was jumping around from there to there. We don't know that.
Yeah.
We just know that whatever it is, it hasn't worked out 5 times.
Right.
Don't know if she lost them, they died,
right.
or they divorced.
Whatever it was.
But now it's led her to a point where she's now with somebody that's not even her husband, which is even like now that's probably a little bit more acceptable that you live with someone and things like that in society. But back then that would have been, and so Jesus is starting to open up. And I think Jesus was pointing this out not to embarrass her, but to make her aware that I know who you are. Mm-hmm. I know everything about you, but yet I still love you and I'm willing to talk to you. I'm having compassion for you. Mm-hmm. And I want to feel that thirst that you have, because you have a thirst there, whatever it is. I don't know. I could be filling in the gaps here, and so I could be wrong, and people are more than happy. But she probably was trying to just find love. She's jumping, and she hasn't found the love that she's looking for. So she's here, and when you go like 5 times, and you're on the 6th one, and you can't find No,
yeah,
and
I didn't think about it from that, but yeah, I think you're right, man. Like, yeah.
And I find it interesting because this triggers so much, right? Like, here we go. All of a sudden, Jesus is telling her, and he tells her everything. And she's like, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on the mountain, and you Jews say that the Jerusalem is in the place where one ought to worship." So she hasn't realized he's a Messiah. She's like, "You're a prophet." And now instead of, because I don't know, my perception, here's kind of the thing, right? When you're tugging with God, God's dealing with you. There's still that part of you that doesn't want to fully address it, so you try to sidestep it, right? Because now she's like, "Hey, okay, you're seeing that. You just told me everything I know. You say you have this living water, but this is getting kind of weird, right?" Because I would feel uncomfortable if you're standing in front of Jesus and Jesus just like, put yourself there for a moment. Like, most of us don't know all the sins we've all done, but if you're standing there in front of Jesus and he starts pointing out every single one of your sins to you, and you're like, dang, okay. And then, like, you still don't know who he is. And all of a sudden, like, she's like, "Oh, I see you're a great prophet." Like, I think she tries to change the subject. She's like, "Yeah, but you guys say we should worship over here." Which I think was it's interesting. I still think that's an important concept because there's a whole thing on the worshiping part, right? Again, you have to know the history. We talked a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. When the two kingdoms were split, only one kingdom had the temple that Solomon built. So guess what? If you're at war with another kingdom, you can't go to that temple. Yeah. And if you're being told all your life that that's where God is at, that's where you go worship God, now you feel like you're cut off from God. So you have two choices. You say, you're right, I'm cut off from God. Or you say, no, God's also over here in this mountain. Yeah. So we're going to say this is where we go and worship. So,
and that's what she did. Yeah.
Yeah. So she comes and says, our people are telling us we worship here, you worship there. And I think Jesus brings a very great concept here in that there's going to come a time where we just worship in the spirit. And it doesn't matter where you're at. Yeah. And I think when he meant that there comes a time, I think he meant that time has always been, because God never wanted to be in a temple. If you study the history of the Bible, God never asked to be in a tabernacle.
To do all of that. That's right.
To be in a temple.
That's right.
He okayed it, but he never asked him. Yeah. He never said, "Build me a home, build me this." He actually several times said, "I don't need that. I've always been everywhere." And so I think when you see that, you see he's starting to break down these barriers, right? Because for her, she's like, "Well, you say God's over there. We think God's over here. So where's God at?" Mm-hmm. And he's like, "God's everywhere. Mm-hmm. God's everywhere he needs to be." And he's breaking down this concept for her. Yeah. And so I think sometimes we look at it and we read this story and we're like, okay, Jesus talked about worshiping, Jesus talked about this. Yeah. But like, he's breaking down a whole mindset for her to open up something.
Yeah. No, yeah, man. Because then that's when he goes on and he said how you can worship God anywhere. And then that's when the woman started talking about the Messiah, which we already talked about. Yep. And that's when he told her, of course, yeah, man, this is this story, man, it honestly, it opened my eyes up. It made me think about stuff differently. The more important key that I got from it was that, God can use anybody. I mean, because like I said, if you look at the previous story with him and Nicodemus, if he could have used he was like, "Nicodemus, this is stuff you should know," Then he goes to like a total opposite person. I mean, completely opposite. This woman, she's, like you said, she's being rejected by people. And then he comes along and he's like, "Look, I got something for you."
Yeah, exactly.
I got something for you.
Well, and I love the last exchange, right? As they close out, the woman said to him, "I know that," and this is what you were talking about, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "I who speak to you am he." Like, he's basically saying, he's just now made the proclamation, "I am the Messiah." Yeah. That's who I am. And you know what's interesting is, so she's here, she's rejected by society and all this stuff and everything that's going on. If the Pharisees and them had heard this, their first thing would have been to stone him, right? The moment he starts making proclamations of being the Messiah, like, that sent him to the cross. But here, for her,
this
was the greatest revelation, and she ran off to go tell everyone.
She knew it. Yeah.
So where she was walking in the day during the midday, didn't want to be around people, was trying to avoid people as much as possible. Now she's openly running out to tell everyone that she can find that the Messiah is here. And I think that's what happens when we start spreading the good news. Like when we start spreading the good news, it just starts pouring out, and God knows God knows, like he wants all of us, and he comes to us in those different moments when we're receptive to it, when we're ready to receive it. Like, I don't know if this lady was, let's say that she was on husband number 1, would she have been receptive to Jesus being the Messiah? He came to her at a time when she was needing a savior, when she was ready to receive. She didn't know she was thirsty, but she was, and he was helping her realize that she was thirsty and that he was the living waters. And I think it's one of the most amazing things of this story is that he came to her at the right time, knowing right when to do it. And as you read through the rest of chapter 4, I think, and we'll probably come back and touch into some of this, but if you jump down to 39, all of a sudden, the Samaritans are now all coming out. Right. Many of the Samaritans of the city believed in him because of the words of the woman who testified, he told me all that I ever did. Like that's the crazy part of it. Her testimony is, he told me everything I did. And so these people are like coming out to see who he is.
Right.
And they come out, and I think verse 42 kind of summarizes, right? She gave her testimony of, look, I met this man. He told me everything I've done. And in verse 42, it makes it clear, like, this is the way when we, I know when we witness, when we testify, when we live our life that way, ministering, whatever word you want to use. Yeah. When we do that, it's merely to bring them to Christ and let them have that relationship. And when you do that, you go to verse 42 and it says, then they said to the woman, now we believe not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. You see, our testimonies only opens up the door. It only opens up their ears. It only gets them getting there. But it's Christ who confirms it. It's Christ. Like going back to Nicodemus, something happened that tickled his ear to say, I need to go meet this man. Yeah. But it was in meeting with Christ that confirmed his thoughts. And I think that's the same thing with this woman. And I think that's the same thing in our lives, like with our family and things. A lot of times we're thinking, okay, we got to be the one. We got to go save them, and we got to this and that. No. All you have to do is be his testimony. And if you lead them to him, he's going to confirm all this. If you lead them to a relationship with Christ, then that starts getting all confirmed, and they start having we don't have the living water. We don't. He's the living water. Yeah. So you have to lead them to him, because he's the living waters.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's pretty dope. I mean, you want to go on to the next story within the same chapter, man?
We can.
Talking about how he healed the official's son.
Sure, you can jump into that
one. I just had this whole story. So the official, right? The person who. Do you think that this official, that he had some kind of faith or belief that, Jesus could heal his son?
Yeah, I think so.
Because they were at the feast,
right?
When he turned the water into wine. You see, so he saw that. So
he saw the miracle,
right? He saw that miracle.
So just from him seeing that miracle,
and now
he said,
"Yeah." Now he was hearing Jesus Christ as the Savior.
Did he see the miracle at the wine?
Yeah, look at 45.
Yeah, the Galatians
when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem.
Oh yeah.
Well, they also had gone to the feast.
And it then says, as he traveled
came
through
again to Cana in Galilee, and then there was a certain man.
Yeah,
where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum.
But I don't think they all had. I think during the feast he had done other miracles. The wine, because so if we go back a chapter in Capernaum, he had done already a lot of healings. Yeah. But I mean, so yes, I think one is he knew of the miracles of the wine. I think he also go back to answer your question. Did he have faith? Yes, I think he did. I think he had faith because he had seen it happen. Or heard of it, or something.
Heard of it, right?
And so that brought him. I think, it's funny. I used to read the Bible and I would skip over all the names of these cities because I didn't know where the hell they were, what was them. But you gotta tie them all in together because you forget. Like, we think here in San Antonio, you're not gonna know every person in San Antonio.
No, you're not.
There's no way. There's no way. I think we're like 1 million plus, 2 million people somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna know everyone, but you got. And again, this is where I'm guilty of it. We get the Western concept of cities and mindset. In Capernaum, it might have been a decent sized city, but you knew the majority of them. Now I don't think Capernaum was a big city, so you knew a lot of the people there. Mm-hmm. So guess what? If a miracle happens in Capernaum, you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear it. It's not going to keep quiet.
Word of mouth, yep.
That's why I think Jesus came at the perfect. Like, people say, well, Jesus could have come at any time. Yeah, he would have had to been on social media and stuff. But the word here at this time spread quickly because of word of mouth. And I think he knew, like you said, you're right. The feast, I think the feast and the wine, I think he also... There were some other miracles that he had done in Capernaum that we read in the previous chapters. And so you have to remember, like, I think Capernaum was in a stir. And when you read about Capernaum, which I do recommend, I think we mentioned it before, I recommend watching The Chosen.
Yeah, you gotta
Capernaum
watch it.
is not a huge city,
nope.
And it's not like, if Jesus was doing this in Jerusalem, all hell would have broken loose.
Yeah.
Like, if he had gone and started doing these miracles first in Jerusalem, forget 3 years of ministry. They would have sent him to the cross in a matter of days. He does it in Capernaum because there's Jews there, but it's not the biggest town. And again, he's dealing with the people there. And so I find it interesting that this person's from Capernaum. He's heard of this. He's probably heard the Feast of the Wine, and he's seen the other. And so he's coming to Jesus and asking him to heal him.
Yeah. And then he encounters Jesus, right? And then Jesus asks him a question. He said, will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders?
Yeah.
Right? But the official was still talking about, please, I just need you to come for my son died. And he just told him, like, yeah, just go home. Your son gonna be all right.
Yeah.
like really? Okay. Yeah. So man, I mean, if you have faith to believe, I mean, so I don't know. I'm just trying to think, like, this official, because it don't really say, who this official was. He was a government official.
Yeah, nobleman.
So what does that mean at the time? Like,
I mean, he could have been anyone in there.
Well, I think he was just desperate for his son, and he heard that this man was doing miracles, And the weird thing that he wanted Jesus to go, because I guess he had heard how he has spoken and done miracles, and and Jesus just told him, you know what, just go back, and if you believe and if you go back, your son will not die.
Yeah, because that's just wondering, like, why would Jesus ask him that question? Like, will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs?
Because again, it's like us, we human nature. We have to see something to believe. You see, it's like anything. It's like when God tells you, for example, to give something, but you barely have anything. And you say, well, Lord, first show me a sign that you're going to bless me, and then I'll give it, and because we have to see it. Yeah. Instead of just trusting. No. In this man. And Jesus told him, just go.
Well, I think he did. I think this guy did trust him, though, obviously, because
he went.
And but he trusted him in healing.
Right.
Like, I don't know if he trusted him being the Messiah.
Right.
So there's a difference. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is and I would need to read a little bit more on this, but this is, again, and I could be wrong. Just want to be clear on this. So anyone that wants to claim I'm claiming to be completely right.
No Bible scholars.
But nowhere here does it say that he turns to Jesus and believes.
Yeah.
He just does a healing.
No.
And I say this because Jesus is telling them, unless you people see a sign and wonder, you will by no means believe. Like, yes, I think he had faith that Jesus could heal, and he came, and it comes and it says that he goes back and he asks when the person was healed and it was Jesus, but nowhere in here does it say, and he kept spreading the word or he kept believing. Now, it doesn't say he didn't either. So we don't know what came of this man. Okay. But here's the thing. What if Jesus told him, no, I'm not going to heal your son?
Yeah, because he could have told him that.
This is one. There was many kids dying that day. Why didn't Jesus heal all of them? You see, that's what I think he was leading to. Mm-hmm. We believe when he answers it the way we want it. Right? This man was going to believe because you came and you asked me and I'm going to grant it. Like, when will you guys believe without me having to do miracles? Because, again, that day, 50 other kids could have been dying. Why didn't Jesus heal all of them? Does that make him less of a Messiah? Does that make him less powerful? No, it's just the way life is. And I think that's where Jesus was headed with them because, and I think even with us, a lot of times, we'll believe if Jesus answers our prayer. And he takes away our addiction, if he takes away our heartache, if he rebuilds our relationship, we'll believe.
But that's not what it's really about, though.
No. And again, this man came and asked him. No other parent came and asked for healing for their children.
But they may not have known.
Right, but this man came, found out, heard about it, and went and asked, and you're right. That after that, the Bible doesn't say what happened to him, but you see, just like us, I've been in ministry for 35 years. I've seen a lot of people come to church, and I've seen God do miraculous miracles in people's life.
Oh man!
And then I've seen God do simple miracles. But then I've seen people come, they ask for healing, they ask for this and that. And then after God grants them whatever the answer is, you don't see them no more.
But sometimes God doesn't answer people's prayer. God
don't know those people start serving God or not, but it's a choice, That's one thing about Jesus. Jesus never forced nobody. It was a choice.
Yeah.
When he called the disciples, he didn't force them.
Yeah, but I think that's why. Again, but I think that's why Jesus is saying this part to him, and unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Like with others, when you see when he heals them, he says your faith has healed you. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of different things, but for some reason with this man and this one, he's calling out on unless you see signs and wonders, you won't believe. And I believe he was very specific with that because look at the Samaritan woman that we just read about. I don't know if you classify that as a miracle. I mean, we use the word miracle, very loose term, but all he did was tell her everything. He didn't heal her of nothing. He didn't take away like her past or nothing. I mean, I still think it's a marvelous, and I do think it's a miracle from like that. That was an amazing story, but I wouldn't but you can't completely classify as a miracle because he didn't make her walk. He didn't heal her of anything. All he did was tell her of all that she did.
But there was a transformation.
Yeah, I know, but
because if you study the story, the Samaritan woman didn't even take the water. She left the bucket and everything and went into the neighborhood or the city and started telling
I understand,
people.
I understand that, but that's where I'm headed with is she didn't need a miracle to believe what he said.
No,
but that's what I'm saying. Now now he's going.
She need to see something happening.
Yeah. She didn't have he didn't have to.
Well, the difference is the woman when she was there wasn't going for a miracle. Wasn't even going to anything. She was going to get water, and Jesus is the one that found her.
Yeah,
he specifically went there.
Yeah,
you see to that well. This man heard about Jesus. Whatever Jesus had done before he came to this moment.
Yeah.
And came and asked him.
No, I don't blame the guy for going and asking because his son
is dying.
But we're figuring out Jesus saying, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Like Jesus specifically goes and says it here.
Right. You don't have to believe
because I believe,
to see
like
something.
I said, there were people preaching and teaching and going around spreading the word. Remember when the disciples came to Jesus, all man, said, "Hey, there's 70 out there that are claiming to be disciples that are ministering and all that. Should we stop them because they're not your disciples?" And what did Jesus tell them? No. If they're not against us, they're for us. Yeah. Let them be.
Yeah.
Let them. And I believe Jesus was saying, "Hey, I know there's a lot of miracles. People have to see something for it to happen." Because,
but this is if you go down
back to the Old Testament. They had to have signs and wonders for them to see something.
Okay.
You see? When Moses came, he had to see the fire.
But I think, the bush. But I think that's where Jesus was trying to get them out of that mindset.
And that's what I mean. That's why he came and said this. And told them,
that's what I mean. Because again, what this man believed because Jesus gave the word that he would be healed.
Because remember,
what happened if? Let's take a second and step back. And what if Jesus said, "No, I'm not going to heal him"?
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying that he wanted Jesus to go, physically go, and Jesus told him, "Just go back."
He did ask him for him to come with him.
Yeah, he said, "You go back." Yeah, you see, and remember.
Yeah, but Jesus tells him this before he even before that point.
Right, but remember, there were prophets throughout the time. So, and wherever the ark of God was, there was miracles happening. So that's where the signs and wonders were coming from during all that time. Now Jesus was coming to break all that, all those traditions.
But we got to remember, according to the Jews, God had been silent and miracles hadn't happened since the time of what's the last prophet's name? The last book in the Old Testament.
Malachi.
Which that was about 400 years. So to them, there's been about 400 years of silence from God and miracles. So when Jesus comes and starts doing miracles, that's why it's a new thing for them. It's a reigniting of it, because to them, God's been silent to them all this time.
But
in that time
period, you got to remember too that there were false gods. Throughout that time,
there's always been false gods.
Right? Yeah. So people were following those false gods because they were giving signs and wonders of things that were going on in other names. Just like now, we have there's a true worshiper and false worshiper. You see, so there was a lot of things happening. God was silent, but that doesn't mean that the false.
Well, I don't think
gods were silent.
I don't think God was silent. I think that's the way they perceived it, and that's why I think Jesus is telling this, because again, here's the thing. I think Jesus didn't come to just do miracles,
right?
And that's the problem when we have our relationship. Like, I really think Jesus was starting to build the foundation here with this man and others. Is that if the only way you're going to believe is that you see miracles, then that relationship's going to be built on sand. It's going to fall, because the moment that he doesn't answer the way you, and that's why I was headed with this. Like, I think Jesus was telling them is because he could see in this man's heart, he was willing to believe Jesus if Jesus healed his son.
Right.
But would he have still believed Jesus was a great? Because I don't know if he knew Jesus was the Messiah, because Jesus hadn't proclaimed it in Capernaum.
No.
And so would he have truly believed Jesus if Jesus said, "No, I'm not going to heal your son this time"?
We see it in Christianity all the time. You see, when people question God because he didn't answer them what they wanted. See, in America, in our churches, especially Christian churches, we see God two ways. We see him as a fire extinguisher, and we see him as a butler. See? As somebody that when we snap our fingers and we don't ask God, we tell him, "Lord, I need this miracle. Lord, I need you to heal my father. Lord, I need you to heal my mother. Lord, I need you to do this for my children." Instead of asking God's will, you see? And then
I'm in agreement.
Right. And then that's what I mean. And then a fire extinguisher, the only time you see it is when there's a fire. And you pick it up, you use it, and then what do? You put it back.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that's why Jesus said this, because he knew the people were headed towards that way
and then,
only having a relationship with him if he did signs and wonders.
And then I believe like the signs and wonders like now, Christians follow signs and wonders. You know, if you see a bunch of especially the mega churches, what they call the mega churches and all that, the big churches, you'll find out that a lot of those people that are in those churches, I mean, there's good people, don't get me wrong, worshiping God. But most of them will follow, oh man, you know what? This church is doing better. Let me go over there. And then all of a sudden, you know what? There's nothing's happening here. I heard there were signs and wonders over there. And I believe that's what Jesus was saying. Hey, you know, don't look at the signs and wonders. Have a relationship with me. Because God ain't always going to do signs and wonders. You know, God sometimes going to let you pass through a storm. And sometimes you're going to feel alone. Sometimes you're not going to, you know, and sometimes God ain't going to give you miraculous.
Can agree.
You know, sometimes God's going to tell you, you know what? I'm not going to do a miracle like you're expecting. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the strength to go through what you're going through, you know, and help you out, you know. And that's why I believe he, you know, like this man, he could have done two things. He could have gone, man, and said, man, who's this man telling me to go back and my son's going to be healed, you know. But yet he went back and believed.
He believed,
you know. Mm-hmm. And his son was healed. No. Now, what happened to him after that? Nobody knows. Because the Bible doesn't say nothing.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think what we're more focusing on you know, was the point of, again, Jesus is making this statement because, again, the people are starting to get to a point where unless they see a sign or a miracle, they don't believe.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we're still at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Because if we don't get our prayers answered the way we want them, then God didn't hear us, or we did something wrong, or we didn't say the right stuff, or it's because of past sins or whatever. Yeah. And we're not that far off from these, and that's not the way. And that's not the way the relationship with God is supposed to be built.
And even our doubts stop the miracles.
I don't think the doubts stop the miracles.
What did Jesus say to Jerusalem?
Because he had no faith, but faith and doubt is different.
Yeah,
doubts and faith, I think, are two different things, and that's probably a topic for another day.
Yeah.
Because I don't think. If our doubts limit the power of God, then God is not all powerful.
It doesn't limit the power. It's like electricity. If there's no you have a circuit breaker. If the main power is not going to there, it doesn't matter how great that the circuit breaker box is, nothing will turn on. You know, and our doubts can because we're stopping.
I think for that one we have to pause till we get to that scriptures, because I think there's more to that scripture than just that piece of it.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main part of this, I think towards the end, is it's about building the relationship with God, and I think that's what Jesus was trying to get here, because again, this is still early in his ministry, and I think he's just trying to make sure the people are understanding that it's not about the signs and wonders. Like, it's great. This man got his son healed, and it's fantastic. And the Bible doesn't say what happened to him. Maybe he ended up believing and became a follower of Christ, or maybe he's counted in the 120, 140 that are in the upper room. We don't know. We have no idea.
Before we look at the last couple of scriptures. It said, and he was now going down, his servant met him and told him, saying, your son lives. Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. And they said to him, yesterday at 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives.
Yeah.
And he himself believed, and his whole household believed.
Yeah.
And this again in the second sign Jesus did.
So then his whole household ended up believing.
Right.
But again, I think the part of this that Jesus was headed to, because again, he says, when will you guys start believing without seeing a sign and wonder? His whole household believed because they saw a sign and wonder.
But what
happens? What happens when the next? Let's say that that son gets sick again.
Yeah.
And Jesus is not around this time because he's been crucified. Right. He's resurrected. He's not physically there. So, and his son passes away. Does his family?
Well, I wasn't looking at that. I was looking that he asked what time it was when his son was healed. And he said it was the same time that Jesus told him, your son will be healed. You know. And that's what made him believe, you know. And it's truth. That's why people go, that's why Christianity is an up and down for many. Because when they see a miracle, they believe. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like when they come to church and the music's going and the positive words are going and the preaching going, people get all excited. But yet when they go home, that's why a lot of them are empty.
Well, and that's why I like it very much when we get to it. And I think it's in John. I think there's a part of it in John. But when Jesus is back in Nazareth and he's proclaiming to be, like he's reading in Isaiah, one of the things they're asking him to do is do signs and wonders. And he tells them the same thing. He's like, do I have to do signs and wonders for you guys to believe? Yeah. And that was one of the things that, because here's the thing, like, if Jesus is the ultimate symbol of God's love, and this is God's ultimate love for us being shown through here, like, I think Jesus is speaking on behalf of God, and he's trying to make us understand, like, we shouldn't have to see what we call signs and wonders to believe in him, because everything around us is signs and wonders. The way we breathe, the way we live, the way, but unless God answers our prayers, sometimes we don't believe. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to really drive.
And I guess we're all guilty of that.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that.
No, I think we all are. Yeah. I think we all are. And that's where we.
And sometimes, you know, I've done it still too dumb. After being in the ministry 5 years, sometimes I have to tell God, I need a miracle. I need to show you that you're with me and all that. And you know what? Sometimes because of his love and mercy, he'll do it. And tell me, you know what? You needed this to really believe that I'm still with you after all this time, you know, and that's when he'll show me where my relationship is with him.
Sometimes he won't do it because he's going to also show you, I don't need to do that.
I understand. But what I'm saying that sometimes he does it to show us where we're at, to show us this is what you're following. You're following the blessing and not the blesser.
I agree. See? And that's kind of why
and that's sad. But that's where it's a personal relationship.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why Jesus was addressing this right here, because again, he's doing these miracles and stuff, and that's the thing. Like, one of the things I think we sometimes miss in Christianity, and we have to find out and look at God and truly search our relationship. Is our relationship built on what we get out of God, or is it just built on knowing God? Right? With the Samaritan woman, it was, I know who you are. You don't know who I am. And when Jesus was talking to her, he's trying to reveal to her who he is.
Right. I know who you are.
You know, and that's the same thing with God. God's trying to reveal to us who he is. Not what we think he should be, because a lot of times, to your point, we think he should be the person that saves us from every circumstance, that saves us from every hurt, from every pain. And God never promised us that. No. That's nowhere in the Bible that God says that he's saving us from all those things. He says that he's going to save our soul because he loves us, but it never. And I think that's one of the things, like, that Jesus, I think we're going to see this throughout his ministry. Yeah. This is the one time. This is not the first. This is maybe the first. I don't remember, but it's not going to be the last time he makes a statement like this.
And you know,
because he's going to, throughout his ministry, push this point of, if you're focused on the miracles, if you're focused on the wonders, this relationship is not going to last.
And he's not always going to take away the consequences. You know, and that's where people think that God is always going to take away the consequences of our decisions. He's not. You know, he's not always going to take it away. Sometimes he will, and sometimes he's not.
No, totally. You know, but totally agree. Well, that was chapter 4. Hopefully, you guys got so you're walking off the thing. You ready to run out the thing? Just pull up the mic and just ready to go. Well, with that, hey, thanks for joining us. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with chapter 5.
Yeah.
Thanks.